Welcome everyone to another episode of the world's greatest news and reviews.
Giving you opinions about nerd stuff is our superpower.
And Captain Mao.
And I'm Weapon 2, folks. Good to see you. Good to see you, Captain Mao.
It was great to see you, Weapon 2.
Yeah, I know.
How the hell have you been? It's been a while.
I've been fantastic. Just loving life, living La Vida Loca.
Thank you guys for joining us. Today, we are going to give you our official review for the New Mutants. So, the New Mutants dropped out of nowhere. I got a text message from this man today being like, hey, I just watched the New Mutants. Let's review it today. And I'm like, I'm at work, bro. All right, I'll figure it out. So it released on VOD, right? So you could rent it on Amazon Prime or anything like that.
You can rent it on Amazon Prime. You can rent it on YouTube. You can rent stuff on there. And also there was one of the streaming services you can buy it. But I mean, unless you want to own it, which, I mean, you could if you want to. Yeah. I think it's good. I mean...
Well, we'll get there.
Rent it.
But just rent it.
There's also $5.99.
Yeah, there's also one Blockbuster in the world left in Oregon that you could probably pick it up at. So
yes,
they might be closed.
Maybe.
Anyway, so the New Mutants is the last.
I saw somebody buy it on Blu-ray too or something.
Don't do that. Is the last XMen property made by Fox.
That is correct, sir.
That will ever happen. Thank the gods. And okay, so we'll keep the first part of this review spoiler free. We'll get into spoilers after the fact. I don't know that much about the New Mutants as a whole. I know some of the characters on there, but for the most part, I was going into this blind, except for having watched the trailers. So I think that was kind of an interesting perspective for me, because most of the time when I watch a superhero movie, I at least know about the character and their backstory and have an idea of what to expect. This I was going in pretty blind. You know a lot about the New Mutants.
I love the New Mutants.
So describe to the kids at home what the New Mutants are and what this movie is.
Well, let me tell you, folks. So much like I liked the original X-Men when they were kind of young, trying to figure out their powers, really didn't know them all. This is kind of a reboot of that. In fact, when the New Mutants came out, they were wearing the same yellow and black, blackish blue type uniforms that the original X-Men wore, and they are kind of a revamp of it's basically takes place after the rest of the X-Men have gone into adulthood and they're basically on their own. In the comic books, it was a new team for Professor X to train, and they came out in, I remember like in 82, 83 is when they came out. I was about 13 or 14, and I started collecting these comic books from number 1, and I probably had one through well into the 30s or 40s or something of this from the time it was first coming out. I liked them from the time they first came out. And
so these are characters that are near and dear to your heartstrings.
Yeah, for me, for sure.
So you actually were invested in this and you wanted this to be good.
That is correct, sir.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Psyche is maybe one of the best names for a character I have ever heard. I assume he can create illusions and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's a her.
It's a her. She can create illusions.
That's the Native American that you see in the movie.
Oh, they never refer to her as that. Okay.
Danny Moonstar.
Yeah. So Psyche, because she makes you see things, right? Or Mirage, I assume.
Yes.
So if I had that power, do you know what my superhero name would be?
Tell me, sir.
Lol. Yeah. All right. So, okay, that's really cool. Thanks for the history lessons on the New Mutants. So now let's talk about this movie as a whole and what we thought about it. So, I did not have the highest of expectations going into this. In fact, when the first trailer dropped, I pretty much said I believed it was going to be awful. Second trailer dropped, and I am on record as saying I think it might be good now. Like, I got a little optimistic, remember? And so I watched this, and honestly, not bad. Not a bad movie. I was into it. It wasn't bad. It's not the best thing in the world, but it doesn't follow a traditional superhero structure for a movie.
Right.
They lean pretty hard into... I mean, they kind of lean into the horror element. They make the trailers make it look like it's gonna be a horror movie, and it's kind of not though. Like it's right. Not as much of a horror movie as the trailers made it seem. In fact, they kind of show all the horror shit in the trailers, but that's not to the movie's detriment because you expect it to go the hard horror route, or at least I did, and then it didn't. It went a completely different direction, and honestly, I was okay with it. Like it was interesting. Where the conflict was coming from, and we'll get to in spoilers, was as you're watching the movie, you can tell where it's coming from. But going into the movie, not what I expected at all. I thought all the actors portraying the characters did a good job. The acting was kind of weak at some points, but not enough to like ever take me out of it. Some of the accents, it was funny because some of the actors would do the accent and they would be really good in some scenes, and then some scenes like forget that they were doing an accent,
Right.
and then kind of like, oh shit, yeah, that's right, raw, you know what I mean? So that was funny, and some of the characters were being a little overly dramatic, and some of the acting was a little over there, but whatever. Like there was some cheesiness to it, but nothing ever took me completely out of it, and I legitimately gave a shit about all the characters. I wanted to know why they were there, what their backstories were. There were some lines that legitimately made me laugh. There were some moments that legitimately made me cringe. But as a whole, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie. I was pleasantly surprised with it. And Macy Williams, Arya Stark, was very good in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of other characters we'll touch on when we get into spoilers that were quite good in this movie. But as a whole, I surprisingly really enjoyed it. Weapon 2, what did you think of the movie?
I liked it. I thought it was a good movie. I really enjoyed it. But to tell you, I probably would have enjoyed this kind of regardless because I was invested in the characters. But as far for trying to be objective in the whole movie, I thought it was really good. I completely disagree with tons of other people who put their opinions out, and I've seen them all over the place about
Very
how
negative.
they hated it. Oh yeah,
No,
a lot
it's
of
not,
people
it's
are
not,
negative.
No, okay, fair.
And so here's the deal. Without doing any spoilers, the things the things that I think that could have made this better, I think the movie should have been longer. It was way too short for what they were trying to do. And I think that I wish that they would have leaned, I don't know what the rating for this was, but I wish they would have put it in an R and leaned into more of a horror feel to
Agreed.
it. I think that's a niche they could have really got into that
And they
people would have
didn't.
been really interested in and would have really liked.
You're
to see
right,
that.
because it does feel like at least half of it, like that's what it wants to do.
Right.
And then it kind of goes the other way.
But what it looked like is they were like, oh, we don't want to make this an R-rated movie.
Yes,
we want
we need to
make
get that
so-
PG-13.
So let's back off. And I felt like at one time they probably wanted to go that route and then had second thoughts.
No, I think the way the movie feels is that at one time they were told they got an R and go for it.
Right.
Because there are some scenes in that movie that are legitimately disturbing. Mm-hmm. And then there are other scenes that are just typical superhero stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I agree. Tonally, it is kind of flip-flopping. And so I agree that fucking pick your direction. If I got to choose, I would say go horror because that's different. But I wouldn't say the movie suffered too much because of that because it was still enjoyable. But I think the length thing, I agree. It should have been longer if they picked a tone and went with it because it was kind of inconsistent. The fact that it was shorter, it never felt bogged down to me. But if you were going to lean into the horror thing, yeah, give yourself another half hour and go for it.
It felt rushed, like they were trying to rush from thing to thing to thing in this, where when you're trying to introduce these characters, I think a little more time kind of background-wise would have helped that story a lot. But I think that this story was as much as it was a superhero movie, it was a movie about what the original comic book was, and it's being a mutant who's just discovering your powers. You don't know anything about them. You know, the thing that the movie does different than the comic book is they puts them in this scenario where they don't really know what's going on. They're guessing. They don't know what's going on. They don't know anything about their powers. There's something happening. They don't know what. They don't know, unlike the XMen, they know how to use their powers and fight. They don't even know really what their powers are yet. So that's kind of an interesting, and it's all about being a teenager too. In the middle of all this, they're figuring out stuff that regular teenagers do about how they fit in, what they're all about, and all that stuff.
Well, and that's one thing that the X-Men did well in general in the comics and in any version of it is like the powers manifest at puberty. Mm-hmm. So, like, take that transition that's happening to you as just a human person anyway, that's awkward and horrible and all this kind of stuff, and then amplify it with these powers that you have, right? And so I think the movie portrayed an aspect of that we haven't seen in the movie universe yet, in that we see these characters where their powers are just manifest. Aside from like Rogue in the first movie, when we see their powers first manifest, They don't know what the hell is happening. They're scared. And then all of a sudden they wake up in this facility and they're like, what the hell just happened? Who are you people? What's going on? And then it goes from there. I liked that aspect of it because in the X-Men movies, we see most of these characters already established, already knowing who they are. So that was neat. And obviously you could tell something nefarious is afoot as you're going through this movie. But without getting too much into spoilers, that was an aspect that I actually did enjoy. And I enjoyed trying to figure out what everybody could do and why they were there.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting enough. I can definitely see the criticism. So like if somebody really hated this and they came at me with all their rationalization as to why, I really couldn't argue it, but I could just be like, what the fuck were you expecting though? Like,
well, I'll tell you from some of the stuff that I've read and I've seen of people's criticism, you know what the biggest problem is? Two things. One, they don't even know. I've seen so many comments where people say, I hated this. And they go, does this have anything to do with the X-Men?
Oh, I hate them as a person.
The other thing is...
They talk about the X-Men in the movie.
The same
thing. They say the X-Men.
Yeah. The same thing where... Well, these are the same people who said, yeah, I watched the first 15 minutes and I shut it off. I didn't even like it. Right. And so then you have...
Your opinion doesn't count if you don't watch the whole thing.
And then you have the people who don't know anything about the New Mutants, so they're not invested and they just want to start criticizing stuff. And then you have other people who know the New Mutants, but they don't know the way they don't know the first rendition of the New Mutants. They know later comic books of them, which they're like, well, hey, this should have been this or this should have been that. Listen here, bro, you weren't there when it began, and this is the beginning. Okay, so you're saying. They're saying, oh, yeah, magic should have been this, magic should have been that. And I'm like, she wasn't there at the beginning, number one, okay? And you got to realize that all of these characters are just beginning. And some of them, you know, like magic, know their powers, and they're good. And the other ones don't have the slightest clue. So they're at varying degrees of discovering.
But as somebody who doesn't know these characters, you get that watching the movie.
Right.
Some of them have complete control over their powers. Some have no control, and there's everybody in the middle.
Do you know?
It's not watch the movie. That's not hard to figure out.
I'm going to tell you something sad, and this is what I see. I'm starting to see people in the superhero genre, MCU, whatever, start getting Star Wars syndrome, where they just start not liking things just because.
Okay, bro, I don't know if you know this or not, but it's really cool to not like stuff. It means you're better than everybody.
Yes, no,
it means you're
right.
smarter than everybody. Right. And totes.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah.
Is this the best movie ever? No. Is it cheesy? Sure. Can you pick it apart? Sure. Did I have a good time? Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, real talk though, I had a better time not going to theaters. If I would have paid full theatrical price for this, I probably would judge it a little harsher. But what this is really, the point that this movie is really making for me is I'm willing to watch more stuff at home. I am willing to pay rental price and watch more things at home. But anyway, for $5.99 on a rental in the comfort of your own home, do you recommend it?
I recommend this movie. I would recommend this movie myself in the theater if it was there. So, but for sure, $5.99. I mean, of the choices you have, I'm telling you what, this is a good movie. And if you want to learn about new characters that you don't know anything about, possibly, watch it. Mutants.
Yeah, I recommend this. You should rent it. You should watch it. Spoiler alerts. What do you want to talk about spoiler wise? What stood out to you?
So here's spoiler alert. This is the deal. The things. So I kind of told you all the things I think that I liked about it. Some things that are different in this that I liked and didn't like was in the comic books. It's Charles Xavier is their professor. He's the one that's training them. I liked the fact that they were put in this school/prison, not knowing what's going on, but they kind of think that maybe Xavier is the person pulling the strings, but it's really Essex Corp or whatever it is, who is basically owned by Mr. Sinister, and Nathan Essex, is that his name?
Something like that.
And so So there you go. You got bad guy who's in charge, pulling all the strings, and you start realizing that I wish that they could have somehow made it start to seem more scary. I mean, it's scary enough when they put Danny down to sleep because they're afraid of her, but I wish that they could have started really, that's when the horror thing started, would come in. If there was some stuff that started happening that could really start getting super scary, more scary. Because the thing, I mean, when you get to the end of this stuff, you realize that the scary thing, other than they just kill mutants that they want to get rid of, had nothing to do with the corp.
So that was one of my, I wouldn't even call it an issue. It's just one of the things I didn't expect, is that all the horror shit has nothing to do with the Essex Corporation or this facility. Yeah, they're there to manipulate, control, and train soldiers, killers, whatever the fuck they want to do, and kill the ones they don't want. The one manifesting all the horror shit is the new girl who's there, what's her name?
Well, I mean, her name's Danny Moonstar.
Yeah, Moonstar.
Yeah.
So she's the one manifesting all this,
right,
with her power that she can't control.
Right.
Which is interesting and not the route that I thought from watching the trailers this was going. But like for the narrative of the movie, it worked, right? So like I wasn't taken out of it by any means. But it was just interesting that at the end of the movie, it was even freaking out the person running this program. You know what I mean? Like murder. So at the end of the movie, you get this big CGI monster bear thing that they're all fighting. And aside from the CGI not looking great all the time, because you could tell budget, but whatever. I liked it.
I've seen way worse.
No. It wasn't the worst.
I'll tell you, I thought the CGI was better than I was expecting.
Me too.
I was expecting them have like gone.
But other things like the dude with the fire effects, and the girl with the freaking robot lightsaber arm and the little dragon,
Sunspot, magic.
She was
Lockheed the dragon.
So she was great, and the little dragon was great. That whole thing was great. And I liked when they were figuring out essentially all their damage, like what happened to all of them. Like every time, so all these characters, when their power manifested, something tragic happened. They killed somebody they loved accidentally. I like those stories. I like hearing about that. I love hearing about the tragedy of like how these powers happened. And they all have these moments where they have to fight through that and actually help the girl who's accidentally manifesting all their worst nightmares that are attacking them, right? And so it's cool, and it's down, and like as the climax is happening, they're all fighting, and it's really neat. And the scene that literally made me start laughing my ass off while I was sitting at work watching this.
I'm wondering if it's going to be the same scene that I think.
It's when it's in the hallway when all the small people are attacking, and then all of a sudden, what's her name with the sword and the dragon? Magic, and starts wrecking all of them. And then the dude, the fire guy's just like, I am so going to marry her, or whatever the hell he says. I lost my shit laughing. That was freaking amazing. I'm going to marry that girl. Yeah.
One of the cheesy things, the cheesiest line in this that I thought was crazy was when Magic came up and she goes, lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my.
Oh yeah, there was so much.
Oh my goodness.
But it's one of those like, I was like, is this trying to be cheesy on purpose, or is it just being really poorly written? Like you can't tell.
Right.
What's the one that made you laugh really hard? Was it that one?
That was funny. That was probably one of the funniest things. But here's some other. So the thing about it not being long enough, I wish they would have hit longer and harder on how sinister the corporation was and how poorly they were treating mutants.
Yeah, that was an afterthought.
Yeah, if we saw some really brutal and horrible things, more of that, then that would have maybe helped the tension a little bit.
It almost, it did, because it almost seemed like this facility was running perfectly fine before What's-Her-Face showed up.
I mean, you see one clip of some bad things happening, but you're like where's that? What exactly is going on there?
But everything else is just her. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's like this corporation, I mean, evil, bad guy, because they're going to kill her, and we know who Mr. Sinister is. But like, there's really no evidence almost that happens in the movie to show that that's a horrible place to be. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's where I wasn't expecting that. But it didn't hurt the movie. It was still interesting and entertaining enough for me. So
in the comic book, the Demon Bear is its own entity. It's an enemy of the New Mutants. So the fact that they made that part of her powers and stuff like that was different. And I think in the movie it worked and it was cool. I think that it could have been. I'm going to say something, but I don't know if I totally believe what I'm saying. I kind of wish that there was an enemy outside of them that they were fighting more, like somehow the Doctor or Mr. Sinister or somebody was more of a threat and they were fighting against them, or the Demon Bear as a separate entity. But then also the fact that this was one of their powers that they didn't even realize themselves, or even Moonstar herself didn't realize was going on, and that she had control of. She thought it was still an outside entity that was coming. She didn't realize that she had control over and could have control over it. So I think that's a good element to it, though. Also,
no, it worked for the movie.
Yeah.
The other thing I really, really loved was the Logan tie-in. When she sees what is essentially the footage they show on Logan of them in the hospital training the kids and teaching them and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's the next level facility that they're going to go to. But then all of a sudden, I'm immediately like, okay, you just fucked the timeline, though, because so we're saying this exists in the universe that Logan did, which is a slightly futuristic timeline, right? And at the point where Logan sees that video, which is older footage that the nurse who snuck Laura out gives him, the X-Men have been dead for a while. Xavier had a seizure. Xavier killed them. Versus the kids in this hospital are directly talking about the X-Men. No. They're talking about the X-Men as if they're dead, as if they're not dead yet. And as I'm having this in my head, I'm like, wait. Why in the fuck am I questioning the X-Men timeline again?
Continuity.
I have played this game.
Why are we doing that?
Decade and a half.
If there's anything that the X-Men do right, it's continuity.
This is the last one, and I never have to be hurt by them again. I never have to let them hurt me. I never have to do this again.
Can I tell you that I'm involved enough with this movie that I wish that it would be part of the MCU. And a part of it.
That is a sad thing when the movie was ending. Is I would like to see these characters again.
Yeah,
and we're not gonna. So
well, we don't know.
No, I know we're not gonna.
You never know.
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe we will.
I'm as sure of that as I am the X-Men timeline.
We still might.
Anyway, recommend it. It is not perfect, but it is worth watching. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. Weapon 2, closing thoughts.
I was glad to see that it finally came out. I mean, I started thinking that it was never going to see the light of day.
Out of nowhere, no fanfare, no announcement, no, it was just...
And when you see something get shelved the way this did and pushed around and put off for so long, you really start kind of losing hope for it being very good. And I'll tell you, I had, even as a fan, I started going, oh man, this is not going to be good. But it was good, and I enjoyed it. Of course, it could have been better. Could have done stuff different, like a lot of movies. But I was pleasantly surprised, and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Luckily, it was just good enough. And that's all we could really hope for.
Yeah. It's better than nothing, that's for sure.
It's not nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the World's Greatest News and Reviews. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications.
Peace.